The Morrison Formation, a late Jurassic fossil formation from North America that is found in modern Colorado, Wyoming, and the outskirts of Nebraska, Montana, North Dakota, and even South Dakota. See, back in the late Cretaceous, this was a big basin stretching from Mexico all the way to Alberta, Canada. It was a lush land of plains, forests, and even lakes, rivers, and water basins, of course. Also a very mountainous land. It still is today. Today it's very dry and arid. Of course, it's there's a lot of sedimentary rock like silt, sandstone, and even limestone. That's how we found the fossils of these creatures. Back then, this land was filled with a lot of dinosaurs, as the land was perfect to have such a plethora of them. In fact, there's such a plethora of dinosaurs in this formation. In fact, most of them are sauropods. That I'm going to have to make another video on the sauropods and other dinosaurs of this formation. But in this video, I want to specifically talk about the theropods of this formation. The big three theropods I want to talk about are Allosaurus, Ceratosaurus, and Torvosaurus tanneri. I'm talking about these theropods specifically because I think they're the most interesting and well-known and fun to just talk about. So let's get into it. The first theropod we're talking about is Ceratosaurus because I could just not wait. Ceratosaurus is the coolest theropod in the Morrison Formation. You could argue all you want, but it just is. Ceratosaurus was a medium-sized theropod with lengths of up to 23 to 20, at least 25 feet in length. Now, what's really cool about Ceratosaurus is those lacrimal crests and that nasal horn it has. It's so cool, and it's just so unique compared to other theropods with crests, especially that nasal horn. In real life, that would have been covered in keratin, so it could have been much larger than it looks on the skeleton, which is just really cool. Another noticeable thing about Ceratosaurus is, of course, those serrated blade-like teeth that it has. Of course, those teeth are also very long. Now, while it didn't have a huge bite force like other theropods, it could have at least bit deeper into flesh. Those long teeth, of course, also help us understand the fossil a bit better and about lips on theropods because they've done studies on them. I mean lips on theropods, I mean soft oral tissue that would have covered their teeth. See, Ceratosaurus had very long teeth and very loose teeth that we find in the fossil remains. And analyzing how fragile Ceratosaurus' teeth are and how long they are, and from June of this year does suggest and show evidence of all archosaurs having oral tissue. The other really cool thing about Ceratosaurus is we have direct fossil evidence of it having osteoderms, which are bones that are directly attached to the skin. It's the same thing you find on the scutes of crocodiles and alligators. It's a cool thing because you don't find a lot of osteoderms on large theropods, and the ones that we usually say did have them, like for instance Carnotaurus, actually didn't. What its crests were for is really just up for anything. It's most likely for display structure and species recognition, especially since of all the theropods in the Morrison Formation, it did make it look different and distinctual, and probably for show and maybe even mating purposes too. While we're talking about Ceratosaurus, we might as well talk about the old theory from Robert Backer, who said that it looked like because of the flexibility of Ceratosaurus's tail and it looked like it had longer neural spines, it was semi-aquatic. Studies later on showed that now wasn't true because it lacked other proper adaptations for being a semi-aquatic animal. Now, the first specimen we have of Ceratosaurus ever discovered was actually pretty complete for the time, and it was the Garden Park specimen, and it's still one of the most complete specimens we have of Ceratosaurus. In the past, it was controversial where Ceratosaurus fit and was classified among other theropods. We now know it was a part of its own family, Ceratosauridae, and it was closer to Coelurosaurs than it was to other theropod dinosaurs, being closer to Abylosaurs and even Nodosaurs than it was to even like Allosaurus or T-Rex. And it's usually simple to tell because these theropods possess 4 fingers, while the other ones, like Allosaurus, possess 2 or 3 or less. Tyrannosaurus did relatively have a big head and long legs, so it would be able to go after and prey on medium to small prey like Camptosaurus and Dryosaurus. Okay, now it's time to talk about Allosaurus. All 3 of them. Yes, there are 3 species of Allosaurus in the Morrison Formation. Anax, Fragilis, the most popular, and Gemensini. Let's get into it. Starting off with the line of the Jurassic, we have Allosaurus fragilis, the first discovered one and the most well-known one. Of course, it has those lacrimal crests, just like all the species, and an overall robust build with a robust skull. This one was the top predator in its formation, and of course, it has those 3 fingers with those long claws and those long. Allosaurus fragilis got to about 30 feet long, and of course, One thing special about Allosaurus fragilis is that skull. Allosaurus fragilis did have a distinctive skull, not just because of that lateral crest, but because of the shape of its skull and the shape of its teeth were very interesting. See, Allosaurus had very serrated teeth that were made for tearing into flesh instead of biting down onto it. And its skull could open very wide, so it was really good at doing this. It was once proposed that it had a very hatchet bite, like chopping on wood. We don't really believe it does this anymore because it would just hit its lower jaw and break its skull together. So I mean, it just doesn't make sense. Allosaurus was a very opportunistic feeder, meaning it would eat any large to medium-sized animal in the Morrison Formation. Stegosaurus, Camptosaurus, even thyropods and smaller sauropods like Brontosaurus. Those long, sharp claws would help do the job too before holding onto its prey as it bites down and tears the flesh off of it. It would have been a horrible sight. Now, there's a lot of Allosaurus fossils found in the Morrison Formation. It probably was the most widespread and abundant of the theropods in the Morrison Formation, just because of how adaptive it was. But the most special one I would have to say is Big Al. It is not only a very complete specimen, but it really introduced most of us to Allosaurus because it was the one that was featured in the original Walking with Dinosaurs documentary. Big Al is also a specimen that suffers from a lot of injuries in its life. It got bone infections and a bunch of different wounds, and it still got to be a fully grown big Allosaurus. In the documentary, it was originally thought to be fragilis, but later analyzing and some other Allosaur fossils, we later realized it was a different species named Dimensini. Now, Dimensini was a bit smaller, lived a little bit earlier, got to about 26 to 28 feet long. Now, Dimensini was less robust and smaller than fragilis. It just had a much more thinner skull, as you can tell, and look at it, you could just tell it's a less robust skull from fragilis.
Now, Allosaurus was always getting injured in some kind of way, and because it preyed on Allosaurus, it would have constant run-ins and territorial fights with it, and just fights with it in general. And let's just say it didn't always win, because we have lots of Stegosaurus damage on Allosaurus skeletons, and even one that was attacked right in the pubic area with a Stegosaurus tail. So yeah, it wasn't always lucky for Allosaurus. And we know from skull damage and premaxillar bite marks that they would compete in face biting over territorial disputes or just aggression in general. Yeah, Allosaurus was an amazing but extremely ferocious dinosaur in the Morrison Formation. And then we have Allosaurus anax. It was a very interesting story on its discovery and classification as an Allosaurus species because it wasn't always. You probably know that Allosaurus anax used to be Saurophaganax. It was a few fragmentary remains were picked up in the 1930s, and it was named Saurophaganax in 1995. Allosaurus anax or Saurophaganax was a very controversial where it was placed in Allosauridae or Metriocanthidae and whether it was an Allosaurus or not. Also a chimera, so it was mixed in with a lot of possible sauropod bone. And the holotype specimen seems to consist of some type of diplodocid vertebrae. Then a paper in 2024 analyzed the bones, and because it was a chimera, classified it as a nomen dubia. And then later that year, they reanalyzed them and saw that there's some skull material that belongs to a new species of Allosaurus, Allosaurus anax, said to be the largest Allosaurus species, reaching from 35 to 40 feet long, and weighed from 4.5 to 6 tons. And now we move on to our last theropod of this video, the Torvosaurus, specifically the North American species Tannerii. Now, Torvosaurus was a stocky theropod, getting about to 30 to 33 feet, so it's pretty large overall. It does have the long arms like Allosaurus with the 3 sharp claws. Torvosaurus did have this long, elongated, blocky snout with these long, sharp teeth, and it just looked really cool. Of course, Torvosaurus was also a megalosaurid. Yes, it was related to the first ever described theropod dinosaur, Megalosaurus. Torvosaurus was a lot more robust overall and a little bit heavier than Allosaurus fragilis, and even had stockier hind limbs. And it had thicker teeth with a stronger jaw, so it would have probably had more of a powerful bite force than Allosaurus. And Torvosaurus was just such a cool, powerful Jurassic theropod, and I just feel like it's really underrated. I really like this video on Morrison Formation theropods. I really love dinosaurs. I think these animals are so cool, and I would love to see what you guys think about me doing a sauropod video. So if you guys would like for me to do a sauropod video, just comment down below, and please don't mind liking and subscribing if you feel like, and I'll see you guys in another video.